I believe that Bowman Models was founded by Geoffrey Bowman Jenkins of Norfolk in the UK in about 1923. Initially founded in association with a company called Hobbies, and together they made boats and various other steam type models. Bowman severed his relationship with Hobbies in 1935, and at that time the production of Bowman type models stopped. Probably the most famous of the Bowman models is an express locomotive, model number 234. The model was marketed as a 440 express engine. It had twin oscillating cylinders which actually only drove one axle. There were no coupling rods, so I think the 440 designation might have been a bit of an exaggeration. The model did not have a regulator, and rather like Mammoth had no means of lubrication. You simply fired it with meths, and when it raised about 15 psi gave it a gentle push and off it would go. The contemporary marketing information claimed the engine would run for 1.5 miles non-stop. Based on my garden railway experience and the capacity of the spirit tank on this model, I think that claim was highly optimistic. I bought this little toy from a supposed antique dealer, and I can't remember exactly when. It could be 10-15 years ago, maybe longer. A complete basket case really. It had all been on fire, spirit tank was wrecked. One of the pistons and connecting rods was completely missing. Safety valve didn't exist, that was gone. And he wanted £120, which was ridiculous. I think if I remember rightly, foolishly in the end I paid him £80, and he must have seen me coming, I think. I don't know what was in my mind really. Anyway, I felt a bit sorry for it and felt that it deserved a better fate than the scrap bin from which it was obviously destined. This is the spirit tank and burner removed from the Bowman 234 locomotive. As you can see, there's a square spirit tank. This device is an air release. That's a hollow tube, just swivels very loosely. That's the little nut that screws the tank into the bottom of the cab. There are 6 burner tubes. At the moment they don't have wicks in. And interesting one for the health and safety jobsworths in the current age. The top of the spirit tank is surmounted by a lump of lead, presumably to give some counterbalance to the locomotive. Interesting one that. As you can see from the rule, the whole assembly is probably about 7.5 inches long. This tank, when I bought the locomotive, whenever that was completely and utterly wrecked, totally demolished. It had obviously been on fire. All the joints were sprung. The whole thing was in just a mangled mess. Somebody had tried very unsuccessfully and to resolder it together and made a complete hash of the job. But anyway, I managed to put it back together and using soft solder got it back to where it is now, and it is actually leak proof. I also think, can't quite remember, but the main burner tube and some of the burners were all flopping about, where clearly the whole thing had got overheated and all the soft solder had run, which probably explains why the locomotive itself showed, when I got it, extreme evidence of the whole thing being on fire. And I could imagine if this lot went up, there would be a very useful flame until the spirit got exhausted. The lead weight on top of the spirit tank is just drops in, it's just a loose fit. And you can see this venting arrangement which screws in here. It's just a piece of brass tube bent and trapped into the end of a ferrule. Clearly that's necessary to both let air out when you're filling the tank and also let air in as the spirit level drops. I assume, but don't really know, that this plug here is when you fill, that is the maximum level, I would guess, to which the tank should be filled to avoid spirit spilling out of the burners and being the source of another fire. What would the health and safety moguls make of it in 2019? This thing was designed and built in the early 1930s, I believe, obviously different times. At the time I did the original refurbishment, I must have had a tin of miscellaneous yellowy greeny paint, which I duly slapped on, as you can see. This colour will be replaced as part of the work that I'm now carrying out. This is a picture off the internet of the original locomotive with presumably an original tender. As you can see, they seem to be different colours, and I'm going to aim for something in between. In 1930 or thereabouts, the locomotive would have cost £1, 10 shillings. That would be about the equivalent of £100 in 2019. And originally the locomotive did not come with a tender. The tender was an extra. The tender would have cost an extra 10 shillings and sixpence, which is something like £50 in today's money. To put the money in a bit more context, the average weekly wage in England in 1930 apparently was £1, 11 shillings and 8 pence, that's 8 old pennies, for a 50-hour week. So the locomotive, complete with tender, would have been a week's wages. My plan is to now make a tender to go with the locomotive and then repaint the hull in a more appealing shade of green. More appealing means that I'll like it better than the paint I used originally. I haven't been able to find any information about the original colour of the locomotive, so I've mixed up a kind of bespoke shade of green, and I'm just going to use that. The locomotive is O gauge, and I've soft soldered up a bit of brass track so that I can stand the locomotive and the tender on a piece of track. I've gone as far with this Bowman as I'm prepared to take it. I found some LNER transfers in my box of things I don't throw away. They were actually, I think, for a 3.5 inch gauge locomotive I built, which I didn't use. They're a bit overscale on this, but they're better than nothing. And in my view, the home mixed paint doesn't look too bad. The tender I've made for the Bowman is a fairly crude affair, bent up from brass and, where necessary, soft soldered together. really in the style of the original Locomotive, which of itself, the construction when you look at it in detail, is very crude. The rear buffers were turned up on the lathe. I think I turned them from a piece of steel actually. My attempt at lining out is not great, frankly. I'm not very good at painting. As I said before, the transfers are oversized, but they were in my box of things that I don't throw away. I did make and fit some kind of representations of dummy leaf springs. They're all wrong, in the wrong place, wrong size and everything else. No excuse for that really, didn't think about it properly. The wheels came out of my bits box, they're just plain disc wheels. If I find some spoked castings, I haven't actually got any of the right size, I will buy them I think and turn up 6 spoked wheels, because I think the original Bowman had spoked wheels rather than these plain ones, but depends whether I find some. So that's it, back on the shelf for the Bowman Locomotive. I feel that my homemade tender does enhance it somewhat, looks a bit better with that. I don't know how many of these locomotives were made by Bowman, but I believe there are quite a lot about, which is testimony, however crudely they were made, but it's testimony to their durability and actually how well they were put together. I'm sure the toy would steam and would run, but I don't have any rail of the correct gauge, and I have no intention actually of steaming it at all and burning all the paint off after all the effort I went to slap it on.